All right, gentlemen. The red light is on, which means this week's episode of Under Review is officially live. Thank you all for joining today, whether you are in our comment section on the live stream or listening to us after the fact. I appreciate your time. Today, joining me, I have another absolutely stacked with a capital S panel today as we talk about the Bills' biggest draft needs. And before we delve into this topic, I want to give the panel the chance to introduce themselves. Now, order here, I see AJ and then Greg, alphabetical order apparently. So I'll give you guys the chance to go. AJ, what do you got?
What's going on, guys? So I'm excited to do the this podcast. The needs are, there are a lot of needs for this team, but not many like dire needs. I'd say it's a lot of middle of the road kind of. Should you address it? Can you address it? They could go tight end, they could go safety. There's a lot of ways they could go, and I'm excited to talk about it and dive in.
Yeah, same thing. I'm excited to have my first chance to come on Under Review here. Really excited to have you as part of the staff here at Cover One. We've been excited to see all the fun stuff you've been having going. And this topic, I think, is a little more diverse of a discussion than some people think. Like, I think a lot of folks have like a very clear-cut delineation of like, oh no, this is these are the top needs, and everyone should think this. And I think there's a little more nuance to that discussion than what many people realize. So I'm excited to talk through it with you guys.
Yeah, and I'm excited to have you both here again. Thank you so much. And you are absolutely right. It is a very diverse discussion. And I think it's fun to finally be at a point, at least these past few years, where we are rooting for a team that's good enough to have so much parity within the conversation of what are the biggest needs. Because when you're a good team and you have a lot of holes that are already filled, it's kind of tricky to assess like, what do you need now? And also kind of talking about how do you build for the future simultaneously with keeping your window open, which is very tricky. But why I'm also excited you brought that up is because for all of you who might follow me on Twitter, if you don't, at show_DeRosa, I ran a poll 2 days ago to kind of see how Bills fans were feeling about the draft needs in general, what they thought was the biggest position that they would like to attack. And I'm going to present those results right here. So again, if you did chime into this poll, I want to say thank you because I appreciate the engagement. It was very fun to kind of run this experiment with you guys. So as you can all see on this poll, the biggest need that Bills fans, at least who answered this poll, find for the draft is middle linebacker, Major League Baseball, middle linebacker. And then beyond that, that's wide receiver. Then I believe, if I'm looking closer, yes, right tackle, and then defensive tackle was the last. And in the comment section, some of you also mentioned edge was a need. Some of you mentioned interior O-line. Some of you mentioned running back. There were a couple of other positions that came into the discussion, which I thought was interesting to see people kind of give us different takes, different sides to the story. And I was really excited because it meant that we were going to have a fun discussion about it here. So, gentlemen, I asked you, when I gave you the discussion sheet to kind of bring up what you think are the biggest needs. So before we go into that, what do you think about this poll? Do you think this is kind of the right trend? Like this is something that is accurate, or do you think there's different needs? And I'll start with you, AJ. We'll go to Greg and come back.
Yeah. So the thing with me is this is kind of exactly how my thought process is going. I think middle linebacker is the biggest need. Do you need to take it at 27? I don't know. I mean, it's hard because, like Eric's mentioned in the chat, is like the points are so close between the 27th guy and the 50th guy. So like, is it really a reach? You don't know it. It's hard because, and you also don't know Brandon Beane's board. Like we're talking amongst each other, the national media, local media that everyone's saying different things that, some people have Jack Campbell at 45, 50. Is he okay at 27? I don't know. But like in terms of need for the Bills, I think middle linebacker is that top need. I mean, they drafted Trell Bernard. So it kind of makes you question, like, was that a waste of a pick in the third round? I know it's early, but if you can't get him on the field this year and you draft a middle linebacker and pair him with Milano, it just seems like maybe a waste of asset on that pick. Wide receiver wise, I think that's a huge need. I think, that's my second important need. And that's what I mean. It's following this poll is kind of following how I view it. I just think having another guy to pair with Gabe Davis to open him up. Gabe Davis has been at his best when he's had another guy like a Cole Beasley underneath that could get open. So I think pairing him with a guy would just complete the offense. But it's hard for me because it's also a deep class. You got guys like Marvin Mims, Jonathan Mingo, Xavier Hutchinson. So there's guys who can get deep. And that's the kind of battle I'm going with on the receiver position. On the rest of them, right tackle, I'll take a rotational guy. If first in competition for Spencer Brown, Seam Richards, Wanya Morris. There's guys in the mid rounds you can get. So I'm not too concerned with the right tackle position. I think addressing it and bringing competition, whether that's a vet or something like that, is important. But I think this poll shows kind of how I feel. And yeah, so
I'm not far off of that, and I think that the way anyone should be approaching this is philosophically on how you approach the draft. So draft is never actually best player available. Like, that's a thing that front offices and GMs say. That's not real. If the best player available is a quarterback at 27, I got a secret for you. We're not picking a quarterback. It's not actually best player available. Now, let's say something weird happens and I don't know, Anthony Richardson somehow goes on a weird tumble, or we have like a Laramie Tunsil situation where some gas mask situation comes out the day of the draft. It may mean that you have leverage to trade down from that spot or something, but it's never truly best player available. Also, you never shoehorn in your top need. It's not that simple. So this poll is an accurate representation from my mentions, from interacting with Bills fans, and pretty close. I could probably nitpick a little bit on what's an actual need. But this is pretty close to what it is. I think pretty definitively those four positions are at the top of the list. You can haggle the order. Obviously, right now, going into the 2023 season, a competition between Terrell Dodson and Terrell Bernard and Balin Spector, that should be the biggest need going into there. I think AJ's comments are accurate in when you fill that and you get into spots where, of course, wide receiver, right tackle, and defensive tackle are higher premium positions. Every contract aggregate, every franchise tag, average picks in the first round all show you that those positions are higher valued amongst all the franchises in the NFL. But the question is, at pick 27, is it more valuable to pick the fifth offensive tackle before the first linebacker? Is it more valuable to pick the fourth wide receiver before the first linebacker? And that's what's going to come into play, is that, hey, for us, it may be that, we have the top three tackles ranked before the first linebacker, and if one of them make it, we would take it. We have the top two defensive tackles rated above our first linebacker, and if one of them make it, we would take it. We have the top, I'm going to say, three wide receivers ranked before the first linebacker, and if one of them make it there, we would take it. But if the top three offensive tackles and the top two defensive tackles and the top three receivers are all gone, well, all of a sudden, whether, let's say it is Jack Campbell, it may be Trent Simpson, and maybe Drew Sanders, whoever their board has as the top linebacker, it's very possible that our fit of position premium, team need, and best player available could equate to Jack Campbell being the 27th pick. It's all how the board falls. And that anyone trying to say they know that ahead of time is lying to themselves. There's nothing we lie to ourselves more about than definitively knowing who's going to go where in the NFL draft. We are all wrong every year, every single year. It's we talk about it in certainty, and then we're wrong all the time. Now, of course, we have generalities where we're right, where yes, I can probably tell you who 25, 27, 28 of the 32 first round picks are going to be. I could probably hit most of them. Who goes to what team? We're always wrong. So that kind of approach here, I think, is important to have in mind. And AJ's comment, I'll use an example here. There's a lot of things that fit the plan in the moment that don't end up panning out later. So I'll use an example. Let's say we pick a tackle in the third round who has really good potential, and then Spencer Brown has an awesome season. Well, next year, that's going to look like a wasted pick. Well, let me take you back 360 days ago from right now, 355 days ago from right now. At that point, it seemed like a formality that we were going to retain Tremaine Edmonds, and that, hey, Matt Milano's contract is going to expire when he turns 30, we should probably be ready to move on. We might even want to entertain trade offers. So, hey, let's pick a former safety who's also 6'1", 230 and has a ton of range and a great weak side linebacker and have him ready to step in. Boom, we pick Terrell Bernard. Then the season comes, Tremaine Edmonds plays himself out of our price range, and Matt Milano has an all-pro season. Well, of course, in hindsight now, that pick looks stupid because now we've extended Matt Milano and we had to let Tremaine Edmonds walk because of the price. That doesn't mean that it was a wasted asset in the moment. It made sense because in the moment, the plan was to keep Tremaine Edmonds and to move on from Matt Milano. And then the season played out and things were different. So you have to keep in mind that, every GM has to adjust because players develop differently. And if all of a sudden we put all our chips in the basket of Spencer Brown because we know he's there and we pass on Darnell Wright at pick 27, and then he, craps the bed and has a terrible season, that's going to look dumb. Mm-hmm. If we pick a guy at a premium pick at tackle and all of a sudden all that immense high ceiling offensive tackle talent comes to fruition and Spencer Brown plays awesome, people are going to make the comment AJ just made because they say, oh man, what a wasted asset. I can't believe we picked that guy. Well, we didn't freaking know Spencer Brown was going to play great. Yeah. So we took a guy to protect ourselves. I think people get very binary in these things of like, oh man, you should have known that was going to happen. Well, yeah, crap's difficult, man. This is hard. The draft's hard.
No one is able to predict the future. And when you're talking about a team, again, as I mentioned before, their Super Bowl window is open. The roster has starters already. You're kind of looking at it through a lens of, okay, this is a position I can address now, but also this is a position that might run the risk of being a serious issue within a season's time. And again, to your point, the Terrell Bernard pick was maybe Milano might get hurt again. Maybe Milano might not last and we might field trade offers. Or maybe, we want someone to pair with Edmonds should he stay. And then everything panned out in the opposite direction. There was a question in the comment section. I'm actually going to pull it up. Do you guys feel that Terrell Bernard has any future on the team? I still think he does. And I think we can go into kind of what you can expect out of the linebacker room a little bit after we finish the poll talk. But I think when you made certain picks in the draft, we all make our mocks. Our mocks build expectations. These expectations come from our own projections of our views of the team. So when you do that, obviously you're going to take all of the positions that you can immediately see as starting points, right? Wide receiver, offensive tackle, linebacker. And I'm not trying to say it's invalid to do that. I agree with the poll results saying that middle linebackers, debatably the biggest need. Although I think also I would still chalk tackle above it, but
protecting Josh Allen is more important than anything.
100%, 100%. You have a $258 million investment behind the line. If he's getting hurt every year, that's a problem. Like, you can't allocate that much money to a guy that you can't protect. It's just, in my opinion, stupidity. But why I mention that is because it's the balance of drafting for need and drafting for future. Plans do change. So if we did draft the right tackle and Brown does end up panning out, then all you did was you drafted depth, and maybe hindsight's 2020 and you say, well, we used a first round pick and it didn't even work out. But
like Andre Dillard being a luxury depth player for the Eagles as a first round pick that never really got on the field because guess what? Jordan Mailata went from being a 7th round pick to a franchise left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. It doesn't mean Andre Dillard was a bust. He just got like $30 million from whoever the hell signed him. I can't remember.
Tennessee? I think it was Tennessee.
So, a real quick comment. So for Joe and for whoever else was Dan, I think, and Roy were the two commenting on it. I want to make sure that I'm being genuine with my comments. In the moment, Eric, Aaron, and I were at the draft, covering the draft. I did my homework. I was specifically looking for middle linebackers. All the other positions we were assuming they were going to take. I did not have running back in the second and outside weak side linebacker in the third. When they made the pick for Terrell Bernard live, and I'm sitting there doing coverage, I did not know he was a human who existed. So not only was I not a fan of that pick, I didn't know he was a draft eligible player that could be selected. And they took him in the 3rd round. So I wasn't happy about the pick. I was simply commenting that there was a plan that they had a strategy in mind, and then that strategy looks worse because everybody loves Matt Milano. I don't know that we all thought he was going to have an all-pro season last year, like that he was going to be a top 3 linebacker in the NFL. And everybody, Tremaine Edmonds is probably the most polarizing player in the fan base. The fact that he played to a point of, hey, getting an $18 million contract, I don't know how many people saw that either. So I didn't love the pick. I wasn't happy with it in the moment, but I at least got the strategy after seeing how they approached it, and then the season played out differently.
Best part of that whole thing was Kyle Brandt, my man. Wait, I don't know his name. And then says his name.
Look at the card again real quick.
He's very clearly not your man if you do that. But God, that gets me every time. I can't talk about it anymore because I'm going to keep laughing. But I'm going to ask you guys this question. AJ, I'll start with you. When we talk about the positions, again, Terrell Bernard was a surprise pick. And when that happens, again, it can kind of reveal that, yes, this franchise had a completely different mindset as far as their plan for the future. Do you think it is likely that we see that again? And if so, what position do you think that would be, that surprise pick? So what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go defensive end if they don't grab one in the, free agency. And I'm going to say it because I said the other day, I just think that this team still could use a defensive end. I'd rather go the veteran route just because I think they've drafted and, used so much assets on the D-line. And with Epinesa, Boogie Basham, Ed Oliver, you can go across the board. They've used so many assets on, these rookies to step up. I would rather have a guy brought in free agency, like, a guy like Leonard Floyd or Justin Houston or Jadeveon Clowney, Njoku. So there's a lot of guys that I would like this team to add. But if they aren't able to, or they don't want to go that route, I could see them addressing that in the draft. I think Boogie Basham needs to take a step this year. I think AJ Epinesa needs to play a little more consistent. He actually didn't have as bad of a year as some people think. I think he finished with like 6.5 sacks. So there's some promise there with him. But it all depends on those two guys. If you're confident in those two guys, then you don't take one of the top 90 picks. If you're not confident in those guys, then you take one. So that'll really be telling in terms of what their plan is with the D-line room, in terms of Von Miller coming back and Rousseau being there already. How early are they taking a DN? How much do they believe in Epinesa and Basham? Or does the board fall where you can get a guy like Derek Hall and he's your best player on your board and you want to take him? So that's my thought on it.
I'd love to come up with something different just for good content, but it's the same. That's the position that not only is the sneakiest need, also the one that'll piss off the most fans because they'll go back to, oh man, you guys just picked this guy and this guy. Or you get I love my favorite one is, oh man, Bean's bad at picking defensive ends. What the hell are you doing? Like, that's not how it works. Like, if you went on, hey, no good quarterbacks ever come out of Wyoming before, what the hell are we doing? Well, then you would have missed on Josh Allen. That's just not how it works. Or, hey, all the gimmicky quarterbacks coming out of Texas Tech are all busts. Well, you would have missed on Patrick Mahomes. Like, don't scout the helmet. No GM is good or bad at certain positions. The draft is hard.
Yeah.
So AJ listed off a handful of names. I'm going to give you a couple more. What do Yannick Ngakoue, Leonard Floyd, Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram, Robert Quinn, Frank Clark, Carlos Dunlap, and Jadeveon Clowney all have in common? They're all still free agents. All of them are still free agents. One, because of the compensatory pick formula, because teams who are interested want to wait until after May 2nd to make that pick. Also, those guys don't want to sign in a place that a team is all of a sudden going to have Nolan Smith fall in their lap and be like, oh, well, we didn't realize we were going to pick this guy. We don't have that many snaps for you. And all those guys are old and they don't want to do mini camps. And hell, they don't even want to do training camp. Some of those guys might be happy signing like the second preseason game and showing up, because when your job is go hit that guy, you can pretty much understand the scheme. They're going to fit in, hey, it's 3rd and 9. Go get that guy. They're going to be okay. So I think that's the kind of area where Bean already has some conversations set up with agents telling them, hey, if we don't get our guy early on, we're interested in bringing in Justin Houston. We're interested in bringing in Leonard Floyd. If things don't fall that way, let's talk May 3rd, where it doesn't cost us a comp pick. We didn't get our guy in the draft. Then we'll be happy to bring your guy in. We'll be ready then. There's a couple other positions where that happens. Running back is a real common one. Obviously, I don't think that's the case with the Bills. They already signed Damian Harris. But those are common positions that are draft reaction positions where teams are kind of waiting to see who's out there. There's also a couple like that with like Zach Cunningham and Deion Jones at linebacker. So you have some of those spots where some of those guys are now at the point and in the phase of free agency where they don't have any incentive to sign before the draft. Like it's better for them also to wait until after the draft because there's a team out there who is certain they're going to get their guy. Maybe that's the Bills with Jack Campbell. We'll see. And then all of a sudden somebody trades ahead of them and snipes them, or somebody just picks them and like, oh man, we missed out. All of a sudden we need a guy. And now that free agent has a little more leverage and can get the contract they want. So I think AJ's spot on. I do think that that's a sneaky one. And, honest to God, if Nolan Smith falls to pick 27, am I going to be mad that they take a new, younger version of Von Miller? Like, no, I'll be okay. I'll figure it out. Like, it's cool. I also think I've mentioned Ed Oliver a lot of times as far as I don't want to trade him in the sense of like, oh, we need to get away from him. He is our best trade asset of like still young, might still be graded really highly from another team, and maybe we could get something back for him and we create the cap space by moving him. I think AJ Epinesa and Carlos Basham are probably next on that list for me. Gabe Davis is actually probably our most tradable asset. Well, I don't want to move him. I'm just referencing like, hey, cheap contract value, like it is. To be a valuable asset, other teams have to want you. So that's how it works. I do think in theory, if we landed a guy early, I could see it where it's like, hey, the Bills have traded their 6th round pick and Boogie Basham for a late 4th or an earlier 5th, and you move up 40 picks on day 3 for moving Boogie Basham. Like, I think that's feasible where you can see something like that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I'm glad you guys mentioned that because I learned a few things in the mock draft I did with Kevin and Tilt last week. One, our fan base really, really does not want to take edge at 27 or in the first round at all. They do not. And I justified it as edge rusher is a sneaky need. And I said this last week. This was the clip. Von Miller, his health is a question mark, whether you like it or not. He is 33 years old, coming off his 2nd ACL tear in the same knee. That is a problem. Whether you like to admit it or not, it's a factor that plays into someone his age who relies on his technique, obviously, but his speed. That could be an issue. Epinesa had a better year, yes, but Epinesa was never called upon to be the one, and if he was, it wasn't noticeable. Boogie Basham, a former power rusher that doesn't have the power. Could he take a step forward? Sure, but we don't know this for sure. It's very question marked. Do not be surprised if this team takes edge at that pick. It would make sense. You would have the 5 years potentially of an edge rusher that could be very good. You're talking about bolstering pass rush, which if you watch that playoff game and saw the discourse on the internet, was one of the most biggest talking points was this team didn't have a pass rush that game. It was true. Now, injury obviously had everything to do with it, but those players are back. Those injury risks are back. It is something that I feel is a very sneaky dark horse need. And if they were to take it at 27 or even trade up for one, while I wouldn't prefer them to trade up for one, I see it happening. And if it's the case, I don't think it's a bad thing to do so. I think you want to have a consistent, cheap pass rush that continues on for multiple years. So I think that's a need. I agree with you both. I also think safety might be a sneaky need, but that would be a later round pick. Even with Poyer back, he was banged up last year. The age is a factor. Hyde is coming off the neck injury. I know that there's usually like a 3-year timetable with him, but again, you just don't know. Obviously, with respect to Damar Hamlin's situation, it's kind of a question mark. Even though he's been getting clearance, you don't know really what the situation is totally with that. I think safety could also be a sneaky need as well. Not as likely as edge. But again, to all of you that contributed to this poll, thank you so much. I will be running more in the future for future episodes. This was fun to do. Now let's go on to the rest of this episode, which we will talk about our finalized lists of needs for this team in this year's draft. So I asked you guys to come up with 5 in order. For me personally, despite my mock draft last week, I just want you all to know edge is not number 1 on this. My list is right tackle, linebacker, wide receiver, D tackle, and D end, number 5 on this list. There is no running back, tight end, although I do think they could potentially address that in the draft. So I've been starting with AJ. Greg, I'll start with you now. What is your order of operations here for your positional needs? What do you think they do? Or what are your most important?
So I kind of work in reverse. I try to go kind of backwards. and eliminate things as I go. So obviously I joked about I joked about quarterback. Like, I think that's the least likely. Obviously, I'll put the two specialist positions. We're set at kicker and punter. You then go up a tier. Weirdly, out of the premium valuable positions, it's crazy. Like, for the first time I can ever remember, I don't think we're going to take a cornerback. Like, we have so many cornerbacks on our roster already that I don't. I mean, in today's NFL, you can always pick a cornerback. If the best guy on the board in the 5th or 6th round is a corner, screw it, take him. But I feel pretty confident one of our premium picks, and I talk about premium as top 100, is not going to be a corner. I also think if you go from there, we have a lot of investment in a couple other areas that I think safety is probably more of a depth position if we take any. I think it's very possible we don't take anyone in the secondary at all. But if we do, I think that safety is probably more of a day 3 developmental spot. I would be kind of, so yeah, I know some people, maybe somebody sneaks in there in the 3rd round that's just too much to pass up, but with also adding Taylor Rapp, and it sounds like DeMar Hamlin's going to try to play, I think that's probably our 4 safeties. So now you get into that next year. You mentioned a couple. I would put running back next, in that we have 3 under contract. If a generational guy like Bijan Robinson falls, you have to have a conversation. But I just don't see that happening. If Jahmyr Gibbs falls to 91, I guess maybe you have to have a conversation. I think it's pretty unlikely there as well. Now you get into the possible range. For me, possible is tight end. Possible is defensive end. And I'm going to put defensive tackle in this bucket because I know there's been comments in the chat, that are very intelligent about, we have 4 guys under contract. We have 4 defensive tackles under contract. That's how many we almost always carry. We also have Eli Ancow and Brandon Bryant. Like, we have guys floating around. Actually, I lied. Brandon Bryant might be somewhere else now. Whatever. He'll come
greener
back.
Pastures, Brandon.
Yeah, I was so happy for him that he actually got a chance to go play. I just assume he'll come back. But either way, having Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips, and Tim Settle all under contract, it doesn't really fit. None of them are under contract in 2023. So it's possible, but we do have 4 guys already with guaranteed money under contract. So I have them in that next tier. Now you get into, I'm going to put interior offensive line in that same bucket, that tight end's possible, defensive tackle is possible, defensive end is possible. The same thing. We have 4 defensive ends already under contract. I think we add a 9th defensive lineman somewhere. I think AJ's point about free agency is more likely. So now I've kind of eliminated that. That's my possible tier. Interior offensive lineman after bringing back Ike Bacher, signing Connor McGovern, signing. Come on, help me out. Who's the other guy?
David Edwards.
Yeah, David Edwards. We got a lot of guys. We already got multiple starting caliber guys. David Edwards started every game in the Super Bowl run for the Rams, and he's going to be a backup for us. Ike Bacher's a starting caliber guy. He's going to be a backup for us. I think we're pretty well set there. Again, John Michael Schmitz falls, you figure it out. He's a great value. Then you get into now we have need lined up with value, and now you're in that top target range. So I think it's simply, you stack your board and you're looking at who are the players available at offensive tackle, at wide receiver, and at linebacker. And I think those 3 separate themselves from the other ones. I've commented that protecting Josh Allen is the most important thing. Next for me is giving him more weapons that can create early separation and have yards after catch potential. Next for me, of importance and value, is that middle linebacker position, because if we have to Band-Aid something together, the way to Band-Aid that together is to have a back 7 that has Trey White and Kyer Elam and Taron Johnson and Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer and Matt Milano and Taylor Rapp. I'm okay having a Band-Aid there for a year. I'm okay figuring it out. Now, would it be even better if we have some elite talent to plug in there? Sure. But if I'm choosing a Band-Aid as a weapon for Josh Allen, a Band-Aid protecting Josh Allen, or a Band-Aid as the 7th guy out of the back 7, I'll take the Band-Aid there. So I understand fans looking purely in a vacuum that, hey, that spot is Terrell Bernard, Terrell Dodson, and Balin Spector. That has to be our biggest need. And my counter is, yeah, but it's not the most important role of what's there. Even we ask a lot of our middle linebacker. It's a challenge, but you want to know what? The Eagles had a killer defense that had the most sacks in NFL history since the 85 Bears. And guess what? In the Super Bowl, it didn't freaking matter. And the Chiefs ripped them apart and went up and down the field to win the Super Bowl in the second half. I want offense. I want to protect Josh Allen, and I want to score points. So for that reason, although middle linebacker is in my top tier, it's third for me. I have right tackle is my number one. I have wide receiver as a very close 1B. And my top rated player of our needs board is Jackson Smith-Njigba. I would, if I had every single tackle, if I had Peter Skoronski on the board, Paris Johnson, is it Johnson? Darnell Wright, every single tackle available, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, I sprint to the podium to take JSN. Yeah. When you get into, if you tell me that they grade Darnell Wright higher than Zay Flowers, okay, I'll live with that. If they have, Broderick Jones rated higher than Quentin Johnston, okay, all right, I'll live with that. But I think there's a top tier of receivers and tight ends, or receivers and tackles, and that top group of 5 to 8 players are all higher than any linebacker on our board. If all of them are gone and Jack Campbell's the best player available at 27, screw it, take him. He's the best player available, and it fits a need, and it's something that works. I don't think that's the target going in.
Right. Yeah. So I did top 5. So I kind of did the process of elimination like Greg did. So obviously the quarterback position right out the gate was something that they're just not. They just shouldn't spend an asset on this year. They got Benford last year. They drafted Kyrie Elam. Use both those guys. See if you can get anything out of both of them. I went with the D tackle debate. I tried to put it on my top 5, but I just would rather them address that in free agency on the DN situation. Like Greg said earlier, they have 4 guys under contract in the D tackle room. So I don't think that's necessarily the biggest need for me. I'd rather see them get a veteran in free agency, run it with Basham, Alpinessa, the veteran, when Vine gets back, Greg Rousseau, and then you have the 4 guys you have under contract. So my 5th spot was actually safety. And this is because the uncertainty with Hyde, Joe, like you said earlier. And then, you look at Jordan Poyer, who's a guy that just re-signed, who was hurt all last year. And then Taylor Rapp's only here for a year. So there's a guy that's only here for a year. You don't know if they're going to be able to keep him, if he has a really good season, if he gets, playing time, if one of those guys goes down and he fills in and plays a good role. So you only got a safety that's under contract for a year. I don't think it needs to be a pressing need just because you have Poyer here for 2. And then Hyde has 1 or 2 years left. He has, do you guys know?
Is it 1 year? I think it's 1 year.
Correct. This is the last year on Micah Hyde's contract.
Okay, yeah. So like 1 year left of Micah Hyde if they don't extend him.
He just had spinal fusion surgery.
Yeah. So that's why it's going to be my I think they can find a guy later in the draft that can suffice and be some depth. You don't know about Damar Hamlin either. You don't know what's going on with that. Hopefully he can get back out there. But there's just so many questions in that room that I think bringing in a young rookie that has some upside and hasn't gone through injuries and is in his 30s and stuff like that is important. So I'll go 5 safety. 4, I'm going to take a shot here and go tight end. I think getting a second tight end is important. It doesn't have to be a Darnell Washington or a Dalton Kincaid or a Michael Meyer. It doesn't have to be one of those top guys. But Zach Kuntz there's Luke Shoemaker from Michigan. There's a lot of Stan Laporta from Iowa. There's a lot of guys that can play that role. Payne Durham from Purdue, if you really want to go late, they met with him on Zoom. So there's a lot of things they could do in terms of the second tight end position. I think that's a need. They've tried to address it in years past. My 3rd need, my top 3, I'll go right tackle at 3. I think that Spencer Brown was picked to be the starting guy. I think Aaron Cromer loves that. I think keeping the continuity on that right side with Bates and Morris is very important for that unit. If Brown, Bates, and Morris can, play together for another year and get that experience, hopefully Brown can get reps in the preseason. I still want them to bring in competition. Like I said, there's guys in the mid rounds that I like. Even if they took Matthew Bergeron in the second round. I wouldn't even like if they went Bergeron and linebacker and went receiver later, it wouldn't be a big deal to me because I think Bergeron's a day one starter in this league one day, if it's not this year at some point. And then you look at my second need, which will be receiver. I just think that building off my point earlier, the need to just go on offense and, adding D Hopkins, I was kind of against it at first, but then once I actually thought about it and sat there and thought about this roster on paper, at least with a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, I think it would just be such an explosive team. So if you can get, like Greg said, a JSN or, Josh Downs in the second round, or even if Tank Dell falls and you're there in the third round. I mean, Greg, we watched that guy. We watched him in person. That kid can run routes. He's very good at separating, very fluid, very, very quick. So there's a lot of guys I like in the draft in the receiver room that you can get a little later, but I still think that's a top 2 need just because of the fact that this offense needs to score points and they can't put up 10 in a playoff game again. You just can't do it, especially at home. You just can't do it. I know there's a lot of factors that went into that game. And then obviously my first overall need, middle linebacker. I wouldn't mind if they didn't go middle linebacker and they went, say they took like a Dorian Williams in the 4th round, whatever. If they want to develop, if they believe what they got in their room right now. So I'll go my top 5 in order: middle linebacker, wide receiver, right tackle, tight end, and safety.
All right. Well, fellas, thank you for putting your list together. I appreciate that. And sound arguments for every position. Again, as I mentioned before, tackle, linebacker, wide receiver, D tackle, DN for me. So right tackle, again, as Greg said before, I want to protect Josh Allen. I think that goes without saying. I've made this argument in spaces and other shows, but when you're talking about Spencer Brown, is there a chance he could take the step forward? Yes, of course. The year 3, he was a project to begin with, very high athletic upside. The injury concerns are what give me major reservations about that. Also, when you're talking about protecting your most expensive asset, your nuance in that argument where you talk about, well, it's year 3, is what it's just starting to develop. I don't think it's as sound when you're talking about protection for your quarterback versus talking about a linebacker or a tight end or a running back, because this is the most important position in my eyes outside a quarterback on offense. His right side needs to be protected, especially after suffering, and Tilt made this point, the UCL injury. When you are dealing with a quarterback who his prized possession is his arm and the side that he throws on isn't being adequately protected, I don't think you get the leeway to develop at that position. I think you got to come in and you got to show out and at least show us promise to some degree. Now, I think Spencer Brown has had flashes, but not enough as a pass protector for me to feel comfortable with him continuing that position as a starter, which is why I would really like to take right tackle depth at that position this draft and ideally come into camp, compete, maybe win it out for pass protection's sake, and then you have a certified stud at right tackle. Again, it's the draft. It's a crapshoot. Nothing is said with pure certainty here. However, just from my justification of what you want for this team and what you want to see, I think offensive line, the interior line is shored up. You have a potential to close that problem out and have a certified pass protector that where Spencer Brown, and I know you've come up with this idea, Greg, kind of can become like the swing tackle or like the Lee Smith prototype. I know that's the idea we've pitched here, but hold on.
Don't sell it short. It's Bobby Hart plus Lee Smith plus Patrick Ricard in a combo package where he's the 6th lineman and Ty Nseki. He's our swing tackle. He's our 6th jumbo set lineman. He's the blocking tight end, and we put him in the backfield as a Patrick Ricard jumbo fullback. He does all those things. I'm not even joking. If we draft Darnell Wright in the 1st round and he takes over that starting right tackle position from day 1, I can still find 300 snaps a year for Spencer Brown.
Wow. What would you call that position? If you make it up, like, do you have like a buzzword for it?
No, but I need that. I need to find that. That is not. So everybody listening in the chat, I need to find the perfect word for that, like super jumbo utility. What would you call like a really fat Swiss Army knife? Like I need to find a term, like one of those ones where like the 2 red pieces on the side are so far apart because there's like 15 different utility things in between them. Like, what do you call that tool? I need to find that.
A Swiss Army roll, maybe. Maybe. So You've heard it. If you're in the chat right now, come up with some names. I'll throw them on the board. If you are listening to this after we go live,
King Ranch fullback. I'm hoping we got a leader in the clubhouse. I like it.
If you are listening to this after we go live and you hear this part, please DM me, DM Greg, DM AJ, anybody from Cover One with the idea, even if it's 3 a.m. and you wake up on it, like just DM it to us. We want to find this, because if this were to happen, we're all in this together here. We could come up with the new buzzword. So let's let this be the jumping off point there. I like Swiss Army roll personally, but yes, Spencer Brown does have a place on this offense still, even if he gets beat out at right tackle for pass protection's sake. There's ways to use him, of course. I just am not confident with him being the starter staying at right tackle. So that's my biggest need. Moving on to linebacker. This is my second biggest need, but it's my second biggest need, assuming that they keep the current defensive structure as is and that pure nickel look that they do, and have that athletic linebacker that's really a coverage linebacker that cleans up the mess the D-line leaves, or just someone that's more of like a traits guy that takes that position over, because that's really what Edmonds was. He was a developmental pick. He had all the athletic upside in the world. You could debate that it took him a couple years to get to the point of a true starter, and I thought he had his best year, of course, in his contract year, which is why he's no longer with the Bills. I think assuming they keep the defensive structure the same, middle linebacker is the second biggest need, and I would like to see a Trenton Simpson, a Jack Campbell, maybe even if you want to experiment with Drew Sanders, although I think he's way more of a pass rusher type linebacker. However, and Greg, again, another thing that you've mentioned is the thick dime, or potential for a scheme shift here. In fact, I made a banner just for this in case we got to this point, so I have to throw it on the board. But I think if they were to change their structure and to kind of go in a new direction where they want to have a different, different sub packages, different looks pre-snap, where they don't really need to ask too much of one middle linebacker, but rather have a group of coverage guys that you could alternate between pass rush or dropping back, then I don't think middle linebacker is as big of a need. I think McDermott being a naturally aggressive coordinator opens up the opportunity for you to kind of experiment with more tradesy guys, but not ask them to do too much. And I think that the Taylor Rapp signing is indicative of that potential shift as well, where this guy could come in and potentially be like a dime linebacker, someone that isn't actually playing the true safety role, and maybe taking some pressure off your linebacker who might be relegated to just a pure pass rush role. So if
real quick, current listener Mo, who's an awesome person on Twitter to engage with, just sent me this, and it's fantastic.
Wait, what? I have to look at my laptop. That's why I'm leaning down. But
it's like it's technically a Swiss Army knife, but it has like 47 different tools jammed into it. That's Spencer Brown. That right there is what I want to turn Spencer Brown into. So thank you, Mo. That is perfect.
That looks like a torture tool from Saw or something like that. That is wild.
Now pivoting from the Swiss Army roll back to the thick dime, I want to be very, very clear. There is no possibility that we are moving to a base dime defense.
Right,
that's just not going to work in the NFL. No team is going to do that. Mm-hmm. However, I think people kind of conflate what happened the last year or two with the Bills the reason why. So the Bills, let me layer this a little bit. Every team in the NFL, their base defense is the nickel. They have 5 defensive backs on the field more than any other structure. Every team, all 32, it's a passing league. It's just how it works. Some of them do it in different formats. There's different ways around it. Some blitz more, some have more aggressive sets, some mix in other crazy dime and quarters settings. But in that overall structure, that's the most common defense in the NFL. The Bills ran it the most, including several games where it was literally 100% of snaps, and every single snap we ran nickel. And I think some people have turned that over into, that's because McDermott is just so regimented that he won't do anything else. Guess what the reason was? We learned the hard way that Jaquan Johnson sucks. They didn't have other people to put on the field. We don't even have a backup nickel. We kind of had to shoehorn Saran Neal in there. We thought Saran Neal was going to be that guy. He's proven to us that he's a really valuable special teamer and is not an NFL caliber defensive player. We hoped that Jaquan Johnson would be that guy. He got ran off the field when we needed him to play 60 snaps. We didn't have that guy. We didn't have that guy to allow us to be like, hey, it'd be really cool if we could have a matchup guy with Travis Kelce who doesn't make us super vulnerable to the run, and that we could do a 3 safety look. That's why they went out and signed Taylor Rapp. That's why they're doing this. So all of a sudden, now, does that mean that we will now pivot and we're going to be the first team in the NFL to run a base dime defense? No, that's crazy. Teams would run the ball on you all the time. Right. But anytime we get into 3rd and long, that we get into 2-minute drill situations, and we now want the option to be able to run, hey, let's say we run some games 25-30% of the time that there's dime packages. I guarantee you Taylor Rapp did not sign with the Buffalo Bills because they said, hey, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer might get hurt again. Maybe you'll get a chance to play. I guarantee you they sold him on a game in, game out package where he is going to play. Plus, if something happens to Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde, you immediately step in as a starting safety. So they have a plan, and now we have the personnel where we're not obligated to only run the nickel, and that we can do other things. And maybe if we draft a linebacker, maybe they do a similar package where we can get Jack Campbell and Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard on the field, and that we have a 3 linebacker set that we can use, because we also didn't really have that, because going to that was A.J. Klein, and he was an immediate targetable player in the passing game. You need more versatility than that. So now, if we add a true middle linebacker, now all of a sudden you have versatility where you could take a defensive tackle off. You could run a 3-2-6. Guess who runs a 3-2-6? Sean McDermott's best friend, Dave Aranda at Baylor, that he takes stuff from all the time. So all of a sudden, maybe we draft Baylor nose tackle Siaki Ika, and that all of a sudden we have the option to always have a Daquan Jones or a Siaki Ika on the field who can take up 2.5 gaps by himself, and you can afford to run a 3-2-6 because your center point of that is taking up all that space. So we were forced to run nickel all the time because we didn't have a 3rd linebacker, because we didn't have a 3rd safety, and because we didn't have a backup nickel. So all we could do was keep the back 5 back there and our 2 linebackers, because that was our best 7. Right. Now we have other options to play with, and they'll be able to figure some things out.
Yes, and that's
real quick one. Danderson here, the elephant package. That's another one. I've seen both the hippo package and the elephant package, both good ones.
I hope Spencer Brown is a right tackle, right? Like, he knows his size, but I really hope they're like, he's, heaven forbid he ever sees this episode. He's not like, man, they're being mean to me. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, it's just big boy. You gotta adequately name it. But no, Greg, I agree with that too.
Yeah, and I want to say, I understand how enticed we are with Spencer Brown, why Aaron Kromer loves him, why the Bills drafted him. He tested out as the most athletic tackle in combine history, at testing history. That's the kind of guy you roll the dice on. He also didn't play for 2 seasons worth of football because of, he was in FCS, and then the COVID year, they didn't really play for his level, and trying to get ready, then he missed an entire training camp. So if you're going to bank on a guy popping in year 3, bank on a guy who missed training camp last year, tried to play through a back injury, is the most athletic testing tackle in history, didn't have a ton of football beforehand, and that maybe it took him a while to hit his potential. That's worth betting on. It's not worth putting all our eggs in that basket. So I hope that they bring in someone else just in case.
And anything I say, by the way, with any of these positions, like, I welcome being wrong on it, right? If Spencer Brown takes that step forward somehow, great. You know what I mean? I root for every player that comes on this roster. It's not meant to say like I'm rooting for his failure. It's more to say I don't trust the circumstances surrounding him starting at that position this year. And again, yeah, I want to stress too, the thick dime concept is something that they could run and play with. It's not meant to be the base. Like, obviously, I just mean it more so that I don't think it puts as much emphasis on that linebacker. Maybe agree to disagree there. I feel like you still can get away with maybe taking a later round pick on it if you so choose, with someone that might have upside versus that plug and play guy, especially if you're talking about positions in the draft where there are a lot of linebacker needy teams in a row that might poach that pick from you, and you have to have a plan B. Or maybe they don't even go in the draft and go free agency route with some of the guys still available. But to me, I think assuming that they're going to get a lot more creative and maybe run some different things, it doesn't particularly mean as much that they need the linebacker. But I could be dead wrong, and that could be top of their board. Want to move on to the final few, and then we'll move on to our next topic. But wide receivers up there for me as well. Again, I think when you bracket cover Stephon Diggs, and I love Gabe Davis. I've defended Gabe Davis. I'm a firm believer that Gabe is the wide receiver 2 on this team. I think you saw Gabe start in a year where it was his first true wide receiver 2 year, because he had his rookie year. He had the year where he was sitting behind Emmanuel Sanders. Now you have this past season. He still accrued about 850 yards, still had, I think it was 7 touchdowns. Someone can throw that for me. But yes, I understand that there is a drop percentage issue. However, he's a vertical threat. Like, he's going to drop low percentage passes. And also, there were several misfires from Josh Allen in the mid-range 1 to 9 yard range. I remember Eric's threat on it. So I still think he's a viable wide receiver 2. However, I love the idea of adding another weapon for the offense. Again, I'm never opposed to giving Josh Allen as many tools as you can possibly give him. I do understand that this draft is a little bit undersized at the wide receiver position, that a lot of these guys might serve as slot options. But guess what? The Bills could use a dependable slot option, a reliable third down target. They missed Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley came back midway through the season and did have some production, but wasn't nearly the same player.
We missed what Cole Beasley was.
Yes. Miss Cole Beasley's roll Beasley, if you will. Sorry, I'm terrible puns today. But I love the third down security blanket. I think it's so valuable for this offense. I think Josh relies on it so much. It gives him the jive, the juice to keep going on offensive drives. It gives you the opportunity to stretch out drives. I do think a part of the reason why they went so vertical towards the end of the year, and again, it was successful. They were still a top 5 offense. They still had insane efficiency numbers. But a part of that too is, who can you trust on third down in your slot? Did you trust Isaiah McKenzie? Because I didn't. Shakir was still developing. The rapport wasn't there, although I think it got a little bit better as the playoffs went on. I mean, Jamison Crowder got hurt. That was supposed to be a rapport guy to probably beat out McKenzie, because it looked like it was starting to trend in that direction. He goes down with an injury. A pure slot wide receiver, or at least someone that can line up in the slot and give you dependable numbers from that position, to me is so valuable, not just for the receiver room, but the entire structure of the offense of what it could become, which is why I think you should address that in the draft, why I think they probably will, given some of their combine interviews and pre-draft interviews. It's why I think if you were to somehow, please, divine intervention, make this happen, go up and get Jackson Smith-Njigba, or maybe sit down and wait for a Josh Downs, or maybe even a Tank Dell, because I mean, Tank Dell measured in at 5'8". Yeah, a little on the short side, but for a slot receiver who gets open with his feet and is fast, I still find plenty of value in taking him. Or a Jaden Reed, who we think is a versatile guy. Like, there are so many options that could fill this need and give you a dependable guy. And again, while you want that dependable slot option, at the same time, this offense can still function without that true third down guy if he's still developing, still learning the playbook, still trying to get open for Josh and make it work. And to me, I made this point in the chat, I think like last week, that when you're drafting a receiver, you're not drafting this receiver to be your 1. You're not drafting him to be your 2. You can take the swing on upside and let him cook in your offense while the other 2 players continue on their role. And you know Stephon Diggs is going to have a productive year. You know Gabe Davis is going to put up these numbers, could be even better this season with a year of true wide receiver 2 under his belt. So I don't think you need him to come in and be that day 1. However, I do think developing into the slot role is important for this offense, which is why it's one of my biggest needs. And I do think there are plenty of options for that role in this offense. Then you move on to defensive tackle. Again, I think the depth there is a little bit thin. I think if Daquan Jones goes down again, can you trust Tim Settle to take over? Can you trust Ed Oliver to really be the man should a defensive end go down and there's double teams accruing to him? Can you trust any of the depth? Is this depth going to be here long term? No. So for me, I think it's worthwhile to go get yourself a D tackle in this draft, someone very large, again, like a Siaki Ika that you might be able to bring in and have him contribute right away. Again, not be asked to be the starter, but could develop into that role eventually, shore up your interior D line and maybe bolster the pass rush as a whole and increase your ability to stop the run, which, has seemed to be, and again, it's so much more than just the defensive line for this. However, I do think if you have a true threat that can eat up the run, it's going to make things a lot better, scheming a lot better, set the rest of your defense up.
My favorite day 3 guy, Broderick Martin.
Mm-hmm. Broderick Martin has been in so many mock drafts on this network, on mock drafts I've seen just on Twitter. Like, I'd love it. Or I'd love going for Keanu Benton, or even.
Oh yeah. Benton would be, Benton's like a like a Daquan Jones 2.0. He's just a next version of that, to have him learn under Jones for a year or two.
Mhm.
And we can always have one of those two on the field, or both of them in definite run situations or goal line situations. Ooh, give me that.
Right, 100%. And I would be all for it. Or even if you want to go, names escaping me, but regardless, defensive tackle is a position of need I have. I would love to see them add one. I think, hot take, you could honestly see multiple defensive line positions be addressed in this draft. Again, that's just a hot take. I don't know if they'll actually do it, but I think D tackle, and again, my final need, defensive end, are both prevalent and should be addressed to some degree, whether that's still remaining free agents or whether that's going into the draft. I think bolstering your edge and bringing in young guys with high upside that could contribute right away. Again, it's a crapshoot. You don't know if they will, but these are positions of need I have and I would like to see. So that is my 5. Now, despite them being needs that I have, and this was something that was mentioned in the Twitter poll as well, in the comments, someone brought it up. People have their biggest need, but it doesn't mean that's what they think they'll take at 27. And I really like that someone brought that up because it was interesting. Like, a lot of people want a middle linebacker. A lot of people don't think you should reach at 27 to take middle linebacker. So I'll ask you guys, AJ, I'll start with you. What is the likeliest outcome at pick 27? Don't even just like, not even just for need. Again, it's so hard to predict with how the board falls, and I understand that. But do you think the Bills actually take the flyer on Jack Campbell at 27 if he's there? Or do you think they go in a completely different direction based on value? Uh-oh. You guys are muted.
Sorry, now can you hear me?
Oh, you're good. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're good.
I think they go wide receiver at 27. And I'll explain my thought process. Just the overall, I think they've met with a lot of players from the combine to top 30 visits. I think when you look at this roster from the top down and you look at the receiver room, and you have Diggs and Davis, who are two guys that, you know, are proven. They've shown that they can play at a high level and elite level. But once you get past those two, it's a 5th-round pick from last year who, you know, he did have a good season, but can you count on that to develop? You look at Deontay Hardy, who, yes, he can, you know, looking at his film, he's a really good separator, yards after the catch kind of type player. He's got great speed, but he's been hurt in his career, and he hasn't really shown anything besides in 2021 that he's able to stay healthy and play in this league. And then Trent Sherfield, who's never really had any run in this league because he was behind Waddle and Hill in Miami. So you look across the board at that receiver room, and I think they're so – you know, I think they're very in on the receiver room and adding something to that room just because of the fact that you look around, there's a lot of guys after Diggs and Davis that you just can't count on. And that's not saying that they're not going to work out or they don't have a role on this team and they can be good. But I just think you need that next guy to step up. You can do so much. And I don't think you need to get it in the first round. But I'm telling you, if Jordan Addison or Zay Flowers or I don't know about a Quentin Johnston. Maybe they get a boundary guy, but I'm not positive with that. I just think that you got to look at the overall team. I think receiver, there's a really good chance that a good one falls to you with how the board's shaping up. Would I be against like a Darnell Wright or a Broderick Jones at 27 if they were there? No, but I think this team needs a wide receiver. I don't think counting on a 5th-round pick to step up and just immediately be an impact player is a plan. So you got to go. If one of those guys drops, you have to go get the best one and add to this receiving room. So yeah, I think they go receiver 27.
So my biggest hope is not a single player or a name. My biggest hope is that it's an obvious, easy pick. That it's just, oh my God, we can all see this guy falling, and they walk up to the podium and they pick him. Like that. That's all. I want it to be a super easy, unanimous pick that like, oh my God, everybody sees this guy there. I don't want it to be that, JSN and Quentin Johnson and Zay Flowers are all picked. And Jordan Addison is gone. I don't want it to be the Paris Johnson and Skoronski and Darnell Wright and DeJuan Jones are all gone. I don't want it to be that, heaven forbid, Jack Campbell already got picked. I don't think that'll be the case, but and that, none of the stud D tackles made it and Nolan Smith didn't make it, and that, that just all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't really know what we're going to do. And then we have to settle for something and we can't find a trade down partner. So obviously if you stack that board that way, I rattled off a handful of those players. I have probably like a 8 to 10 player wish list where I'm cool with any of them. If any of those guys are the pick, and it's one of the stud tackles, one of the stud wide receivers, one of the crazy good defensive ends, or I don't want defensive end, but if there's a super elite talented edge rusher, sure, give me any of those things that happen. Or hell, I hope that all the teams freak themselves out and don't want to take Jalen Carter, because you want to know what? I will embrace him in our locker room and we will figure that out just fine. I want it to be an easy pick that everybody's like, oh man, that's awesome. I can't believe we got that guy. Mm-hmm. My next want at that pick, if none of my 8 to 10 wish list guys are there, which are all of my guys are projected to go earlier than 27. It would be lucky or fortunate for any of my wish list guys to make it to us at 27. My next thing of who do you think they take at pick 27 is, sweet Jesus, I hope we can trade down. Like, that's what I want next, is that, and ideally, and the thing that could help us is one, or ideally the last one of the stud cornerbacks are sitting there at 27. So Morning Mayan here, I think that if I have it right, Joe, I think we're going to talk about that. So I haven't brought it up yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That I do think there is a spot where the best player or the best two players on the board are cornerbacks, which is not a need for us, but is a premium position that other teams do want. Technically, Hendon Hooker could be in that range if you get somebody who's in love with him. So the challenge is a lot of the premium positions, if they're there, we're going to take them. We're not going to trade down. But the one or the two are cornerback and quarterback. That if one of the quarterbacks is there, if people think Hendon Hooker's a first rounder, which I don't, but God bless them if they do, or whoever it is. You know what's really funny? I probably can't even rattle off the top 6 corners in the draft because I've done so little draft prep on cornerbacks, but Keely Ringo or whoever, one of the stud, Christian Gonzalez isn't going to, Devin Henderson, is that his name? Who's the Illinois guy?
Witherspoon.
There we go. See, that's how much I know about draft cornerbacks right now.
I don't know anything either with them.
Yeah, why would I study cornerbacks? We don't need one. So that's our best case scenario, is one or two of the awesome cornerbacks. Appreciate Danderson there. He's been awesome in the chat.
Go drink beers.
Have a beer for me. Have a bourbon for me. I don't really do beer. One of those stud corners make it there, and that we can drop. My ideal range is later 30s. I think there's a bunch of linebacker needy teams when you get to like pick 40, 41 into like the 47 range. So if we could find Seattle wants to move up from 37, Carolina wants to move up. There's a handful of picks there. My range, it's like the Saints, the Seahawks, there's a handful of teams at like 36, 37, 38, 39. That's my sweet spot, where we pick up enough where you get like an extra 3rd round pick or maybe even a late second. And we still get Jack Campbell or Josh Downs or Matthew Bergeron, or like still a really good player, but we'd all feel better about getting them at 37 instead of 27. And we got an extra asset. So that's my tiers, is that my first group is one of our wish list players falls and it's a slam dunk and everybody is there. Sophia with a really good one. Ogreback.
That's really tremendous.
Good. I like that. That might be the new leader in the clubhouse.
Ogreback's tremendous.
Ogreback awesome. Is really good. Great job, Sophia. I
apologize for interrupting. That was
worth it. That was worth interrupting. So my top tier is wish list guy falls. Everybody is unanimously excited. Everybody loves the pick. It's super easy. That's number one.
Yeah.
Second is we don't reach, we trade down, and we take one of those next guys. Third for me is we just take one of those guys, and that people aren't happy that Matthew Bergeron is a reach at 27, Jack Campbell's a reach at 27, Josh Downs is a reach at 27. But you want to know what? They're really freaking good football players. Who the hell cares? Yeah. We got a good football player at a valuable position of need. We'll live. and we move on. My worst case scenario is we take a safety at 27, or we take, honest to God, that we take a tight end at 27. That would piss me off. Like, Michael Myers is a great player, whatever. Let's figure out how to use our $13 million tight end before we add a second premium position one.
Right.
You know, that's my worst case scenario, is that we take some weird off the wall position. And again, defensive end and defensive tackle are not off the wall positions, but we take a corner or a safety or a tight end or a non-Bijan Robinson running back. I don't want running backs in the first round, but Bijan Robinson is LaDainian Tomlinson. And if you can give me a LaDainian Tomlinson, I'll take it.
Absolute exception. But you bring up a good point. And before we move on to the big topic and all question marks added to it, I do want to say what the value is at 27 is so much different than, and you would agree with this, beginning of first round, right? Like at that point, the waters are muddied. It's kind of, you're at the end of the first, beginning of the second.
Around the 15th pick, things change dramatically.
Yeah. And what do you think is like actually value difference by that point where the Bills are picking? To me, it's like, I do think that they might view the second round as their first round, as in, let's try to trade back because we could accrue capital in this round where we can get multiple players that are still highly touted, could still very much contribute. And then you didn't really have to do anything besides gain draft capital to do it. Like, I would love that outcome. That, for everyone watching, like, I have my needs for this team. Trading back to me would be the best case scenario because it means they want to accrue. They're either going to pull a slingshot move and use that to move up in the second round, or it means they're stacking capital for later in the draft, which I'm a big fan of. I do it in every mock draft I do. But I definitely think when you're talking about the end of first and the second round, the value isn't that far off. Like, people talk about Josh Downs being a reach at 27. Yes, but also no. He wouldn't be a reach for me. Not to say that, like, I would take him over if Darnell Wright fell there or take him over JSN or anything, but to say that, like, if the board is dry and you could trade back maybe early 30s, or even if you wanted to stay at 27 and potentially take someone who you know is coming into this offense to be your slot guy, like, right away without any hesitation, that to me isn't a reach. That's, okay, we just filled a need with a guy who I think is going to be really good, who everyone could agree looks really good. Why not? Now, again, I do think you should trade back if you can, but I also won't be upset if they even pulled Campbell at that point. Because to me, it's like, all right, at their board, in their mind, this guy is way more highly valued than people thought. And they're obviously taking him because they think he could be a starter in this league and be a starter at a big position they need. So I'm fine.
I can tell you, I'm not a draft guy. I am I'm a salary cap guy. I am a football analysis guy. That's where my specialties are. I trust other people who are really good at the draft. But through the years, I've built relationships with Joe Marino and Jordan Reed and Brett Coleman and Dane Brugler. I can tell you definitively, none of them have 15 first-round picks graded in this draft. Like, it's all like 12 to 15 range of like first-round graded picks. Some years you get 18, 20, 22. As long as I've been doing this, I've never found anyone who ever has 30 plus first round picks graded in any draft. So the end of the first round is always a top elite tier of 10 to 15 guys, and then a next group of like 15 to 45 or 50, and it's just a big tier. So as many picks as you can get in that range, the better. So trading down from 27 and up from 59 and up from 91 to grab as many of those top 50 picks as possible is my ideal scenario.
I agree with that. And real fast, I just want to give another shout out, Morning Maya. And she's watching every week, like, been tremendous and has donated multiple times. Thank you so much. And so cool. To finally go off this point, because I know they brought it up multiple times. And again, when I bring the name up, I have to do the question marks because it is the turbulent conversation. And I would like to end our show today with it before we do the YouTube comment thing, which I'll get to. Gentlemen, this has been talked about infinitely since we first got smoked to the fire, even though that fire kind of like wasn't really that big of a fire. It's more like a little match, I guess. But is there an outcome where you could see DeAndre Hopkins being a Buffalo Bill come the draft? Do you think Arizona might eat more money, take their losses, and trade him? Do you think there's like give me the likelihood of it? And AJ, I'll start with you.
I don't think he's going to be a Buffalo Bill. Now, I could be wrong, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I think that, and this goes off my point I was saying earlier about the need at wide receiver. I think the Bills understand that they need to add. I mean, they were linked to OBJ for a year. They added Cole Beasley and John Brown late last year. I don't think they want to be in a predicament like that again. You don't. They were great for us when they were here. When John Brown came here in 2019, he elevated Allen's play. Allen had a really good season, and John Brown went over 1,000 yards. When Beasley came here, he finally found a guy that can get open underneath and get yards after the catch. 2 or 3 yards, get the first down. So I think no. I just think the price right now is too steep. I don't know what they're doing. I know it's going to drop eventually, but I think they can add it in the draft, and I just don't see it happening. At one point, I was pretty, when he was placing the Buffalo Soldier lyrics, I was like I was legit in my room, like, oh my god, like I'm not shaking, but I was like, this could be a reality because you think, growing up, I was used to, and they never had David Nelson and. They had all these guys that they were good players, but having guys like Stephon Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins in the same wide receiver room would have been insane. But no, I don't think it'll happen. But if it does, awesome. I mean, obviously that's a generational player who's still got some left in the tank, I believe. I'm concerned with him going off the performance-enhancing drugs, seeing how that goes, and the injury. Like if he goes somewhere else, I would probably bring that up and be like, hey, and even if he came to the Bills, I think that's a question you have to have, but he's too special of a player not to consider going after it. And that's why I think they take receiver early because they've been linked to guys like OBJ and D-Hop for years, or, for this offseason, OBJ for a year now. So I think adding they've been in on receiver. They want to add a receiver, whether it's D-Hop or a guy in the draft. I think they do it.
All right. So I'm going to go in layers like the other conversations. The thing I'm most certain of is that Michael Bidwell is not going to pay DeAndre Hopkins $19.45 million in cash for what is about to be a number 1 overall pick train wreck of a season. Not only is he not going to do that, he's incented not to do that, because if your season is going to be a train wreck, don't keep your one elite player to now accident. They're not going to be good in DeAndre Hopkins has 2 or 3 seasons left max of still elite production. They're not going to be good in that window. There's no benefit of it. He is a notoriously cheap owner. Came out like in the NFLPA survey, like they were the only team down there with Washington of like the worst franchises in the league for players. There's a reason Budda Baker wants to be traded. There's a reason all those things happen. So I am the most certain of any of the factors here. Michael Bidwell is not paying him $19.45 million in cash. So now we move to the next phase. What teams are in a win now phase where adding a 31-year-old expensive receiver makes sense? Desperate enough for adding that talent to shuffle around a fair amount of contracts to make room for it, and are willing to give up something. We'll talk about that in a moment. In my opinion, that is a relatively small list. I'm going to say at the high end, it's 6 to 8 teams. So at a bare minimum, the Bills, in my opinion, are between a 12.5 to 18% chance, because I think he's going to get traded definitively. I will bet substantial amounts of money he does not play for the Cardinals this year. And the Bills are one of 6 to 8 teams that would make any sense to be interested. So the new GM of the Cardinals, the cheap owner, Michael Bidwell, they are in a position where they just saw Stephon Gilmore get traded for a 5th round pick. They saw Houston have to eat $6 million to get a 5th and a 6th round pick for Brandon Cooks. I think DeAndre Hopkins is still better than both of those players, but not by that much. Stephon Gilmore is still a good corner. Brandon Cooks is still a good receiver. Expensive veterans do not gain a ton of trade return. Jalen Ramsey went for a 3rd round pick and a backup tight end. Mm-hmm. I mean, no one's arguing that DeAndre Hopkins is a greater value than Jalen Ramsey, and he got a 3rd round pick and a backup tight end. So I think it's going to come down to, who is it? Andrew Brandt famously uses the line, deadline spur action. The closer it gets to the draft, the closer they get to realizing they're not going to get any 2023 compensation and would have to look for future compensation, the harder it will be. I think we see something happen, maybe even, and we've seen this in previous years, maybe even the morning of day 3 of the draft.
Mm.
I think it's going to be a current year 4th or 5th round pick plus a conditional pick in 2024. Those conditions will be, is that player still on the roster 5 days into the 2024 league year? Next year's contract's not bad. It's like $13.4 million. It's doable. If a team keeps that, that's a bump in condition. It will be something on games played for DeAndre Hopkins. To AJ's point, he had to take Beaver tranquilizer or whatever it was 2 years ago. Although I will say, when he came back from suspension, he still played really freaking great.
Yeah.
And that was obviously clean without any stuff. He still was an elite receiver in a trash offense. He's still elite production, and his kind of play ages well because he's never been a good athlete. He's always been a below average. For NFL receivers, he's obviously an elite athlete in the world. Amongst NFL receivers, he's actually a below average athlete. He's not all that crazy explosive. He's just a freaking phenomenal receiver with Velcro, like 4XL, I believe is how big his hands are.
Crazy.
Insane hands that he never drops anything.
Mhm.
So that's going to age well. And then you have something on how far the team goes in the playoffs. So for me, it would be a 5th round pick and a conditional pick of a 3rd to a 5th rounder, where if he's still on the team, he plays above X games and the team goes to the Super Bowl, let's say. Each of those are triggers that can bump it up to a 3rd round pick. If the Bills, for example, get 13 plus games and they keep him on the roster in 2024 and they make it to the Super Bowl, of course that's worth another 3rd round pick. And everyone would be happy about that. I think that's where Arizona's going to get, is they're going to have to eat a chunk of the contract like Houston did for Brandon Cooks. They're going to find a team that's willing to take on $10 million in 2023 cap space, and then maybe even restructure that, but take on no one's taking on 19.45 clean. Right now, Michael Bidwell, that's what they're looking for. That's the reason the trade hasn't happened. He wants to trade him, get a premium pick, and eat $0. That's not going to happen. As it gets closer, some of those things will move, and it goes in corresponding thing. The more money they eat, the more premium of a draft pick they're going to get. And it's going to go along those lines. So somewhere in that structure, I believe he is going to get traded. I believe they're going to eat some money, and I believe they're going to get decent draft return. And I think it happens very close to the draft. And the Bills are one of 6 to 8 teams that would be even interested in doing that. So, of course, it's possible. Of course, it could happen. And it's 80% plus that it's not the Bills, because somebody else could also do it. So, I wish I could tell people that they're absolutely the number one most likely team. And honestly, maybe they are. So maybe it's like 25% the Bills and the other teams are 12 and 15%. But there's still a bunch of other teams that would also be interested. They're going to play them against each other. So it is still possible. He could absolutely still be a Buffalo Bill. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's much more than I throw out the non-zero chance stuff all the time. Like, well, hell, anything could happen. I don't know. It's more than that. He's going to get traded, and the Bills are on a short list of teams that he could get traded to. It's possible.
Got it. AJ, you had one point you wanted to say?
Yeah, just following up. I think it's going to be telling with the draft too. Like, what does Bean? How early does Bean use a pick on a receiver? Where does that play into the factor?
If JSN falls, we don't need DeAndre Hopkins.
Right. Exactly.
And do you want to be, Brandon Bean spent a lot of money on Von Miller last year. Do you want to bring in a guy giving up draft equity and taking in a 31-year-old receiver that has a contract? They're going to eat some of it, but you're still going to be paying him a lot. I just think getting a young guy that you can have for 4 years, pick up his option, extend him, let him be the true slot. I think that's more important. For Josh Allen, but if they don't go that route, if it doesn't fall, if the board doesn't fall that way, then yeah, I think there's a good chance, because like Greg said, they want to be.
Well, so AJ, do this exercise for yourself. Rank the receivers and wait until all of a sudden it's like, well, all right, not that far. So of course, if it's Jackson Smith and Jigba, if it's Quentin Johnson, if it's Zay Flowers, like all those, I'm like, yeah, of course I'd want like a 1st round caliber receiver on a rookie contract, of course. Yeah. Now it gets to You can't get Josh Downs at 59. You might have to trade up a little bit. So now it's a second round pick plus after extra draft compensation to get Josh Downs. And okay, I'll give you that one. Like I think he's an exciting fit. Now it's do you play the anomaly that a 5'8", 164-pound receiver like Tank Dell is gonna actually translate in the NFL? When you get to that point, or Xavier Hutchinson or Michael Wilson or Alexi Yeshivas or whoever, or Jonathan Mingo or whoever your favorite third round plus receiver is, if you're going to tell me one of those guys has a higher likelihood of impacting the Buffalo Bills than DeAndre Hopkins, I'd love to have a private conversation with you.
Yeah.
There's, at some point, he is the best impact on what's going to happen there. So those kind of scenarios, like there's a point where, of course, and that's why I don't think he gets traded until day 2 or day 3 in the draft, because any of the teams that are interested also would rather have Jackson Smith and Jigba, also would rather have Quentin Johnston, also would rather have Zay Flowers. And when inevitably a handful of them miss, all of a sudden it's like, hey, Arizona, what you want for
here? It's weighing out like future. You know what I mean? Like it's weighing out like, oh, the unsure versus the sure. Like we know what DeAndre Hopkins is, man. Like we've seen him. He's tortured us multiple
and
games.
It's not a 4 or 5 year window, but the 2-3 years you get him is still going to be elite.
And he's not the one. I mean, Diggs is your one. So you're asking this guy to just be on the opposite side. And like I said in Spaces, like you could do a situation where you have Davis and Hopkins on the outside, and then Diggs is your super slot, and you could just put him wherever you want to create havoc.
Hell, half the time, 50-50, you have either Stephon Diggs or DeAndre Hopkins in the slot. Best of luck.
And then you just get the ball to Spencer Brown,
and then we put Ogre back Spencer Brown in there, and just confuse the crap out of him.
He blocks out everyone from his swamp. Well, gentlemen, thank you both so much. That was awesome today. I had a blast. The D-Hop discussion, everything we talked about with the draft, you guys were insightful. It was fun. I wish we could do this every single week. I know availability changes, but it was tremendous. All of you that entered our chat today, thank you so much for your contributions, whether you donated, whether you just left a like. Please like this video and like all the live streams that go on Cover One, whether I do them, whether it's someone else. We really appreciate the support. It's so much fun to interact with you guys, and I think the best discussion comes when we have everyone chime in. Speaking of chiming in, I'm going to wrap up today's show with a new segment that I am introducing to Under Review, inspired by this YouTube comment alone, because it's still the best one I have ever seen on a video, and I encourage all of you to leave a comment in our YouTube video, whether it goes live.
See if you can outdo this comment.
See if you can outdo it, yes. Because if you can, I will post it every week, my favorite comment from our section. So let us bring this to everyone's attention. Now, I know the screen might be a little bit small here, but if you can look, you could see right here, Mark Harding. This was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I love that it got the most likes of any comment in this section. I hope our GM does not eat the same brownies that you ate before making the picks. That is in reference to the mock draft show I did last week with Tilt and Kevin. That was an absolutely tremendous comment. I know he disagreed with it. I know people did not like that draft. The good news for all of you is I am doing another mock draft next week, and this one is going to have anything go. Trades are welcome. We can get crazy with it, whatever, because last week I didn't do any trades. So maybe you'll see me eat more brownies that week. I don't know. But I do want to thank you all for your support, for leaving comments. Please leave comments on the YouTube videos. Join the live streams in the future. If you post one that has me cracking up or something that I just genuinely agree with, I will post it here. Every week you will get a shout out. And please, again, like, subscribe to Cover One. My name is Show DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at @show_DeRosa. I don't normally go by the title that I included today, which is Joe Metheus, but I do want to start putting more Joe puns every week. I think they're fun. And even if you don't think they're fun, I'm still going to do them. My show. Haha. So, gentlemen, I know you guys got things going on with the network, out of network. Please, this is your time to plug it before we sign off. AJ, then Greg. I'll go in that order. What do you got for the people that have tuned in?
Tuesday night, Tommy Doyle is joining the Going Deep podcast. Tune into that; it'll be a fun show. He got a roster spot last year. He's a great depth piece for this team. I think he has a chance of making it again. So tune into that. And then obviously Wednesday, I think the film room is returning to the Cover One Network. So tune into those two. I produce those shows. If you guys comment, I interact with you guys as much as I can. So I look forward to seeing y'all there.
Awesome. Yeah, this is awesome. And for everybody listening, Joe, obviously we're just in our, whatever it is, your fifth, sixth episode.
I think this is seven.
Seventh episode. For everybody listening, there's 67 people still listening or watching live from what I can see. The biggest thing you can do to help is to press that like button. It's how the algorithm works. It's how you let more people know about what's here. Comments are the next most valuable thing. So if you can comment, and if we said something crazy, go in there and call me an idiot. I mean, you're wrong, but you can do that in the comments to be able to do that. It's a great way to do this. So thank you for the support. The chat was awesome today. It was really, really fun. And thanks for having me on, Joe. This was a real pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Anytime for both of you. You're always welcome back to Under Review, which is every Saturday at 11 a.m. unless the time changes, which it actually is going to in a few weeks. I'll explain in a post down the road. But I had so much fun with you guys. It was insightful. It was great. To all of you, again, that tuned in live, to all of you listening after the fact, thank you so much for your support. We will be back next week at 11 a.m. with another mock draft. So tune into that. Roast me in the comment section again and again. If you leave a comment that I like, you will get posted every week. But for this week, I say thank you all again. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Be good to one another. Don't start any fights unless the other person deserves it. I will see you all very, very soon. Take care. That was a joke, by the way.